Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you've shared with us, the articles, the research, the blueprints, and really try to synthesize them into, actionable knowledge.
We're not just reviewing information, we're looking for the patterns, the fundamental insights that are hiding just beneath all the surface noise.
And today, we are doing an extraordinary deep dive.
Hmm.
It's more than just a single event or a piece of tech.
We are dissecting what is essentially a complete operational manual for the modern independent mind.
Our focus is on the philosophical foundation of Robert Bauer's new series, The Edge of Reality. Specifically, we're looking at the blueprint for Episode 1, The Sovereign Mind.
Okay, so this is really important material. It reflects a very specific methodology that Bauer calls philosophy informatica.
And it feels incredibly timely, doesn't it? It speaks directly to that feeling so many people have of being just caught in the age of AI, the information chaos, the constant static.
Absolutely. And the foundation of all this material really addresses what Bauer identifies as the global emergence of the curious intellect.
Right. These independent thinkers
Yeah.
who are, they're actively questioning everything. They're looking for answers outside of the conventional mainstream streams.
They're trying to understand the metrics in the matrix. I love that phrase.
I love that phrase too. It's perfect.
It's okay.
Like there's a pattern, right? A physics to the chaos that you can actually understand and use instead of just reacting to it.
Exactly. The core premise is if you want to navigate this turbulence, relying on old models, legacy media, it's a losing game.
So you have to build something yourself.
You have to build what the sources call an inner Earth station.
Okay, an inner Earth station. Let's unpack that.
Think of it like a custom calibrated system. It's for receiving clear, high signal data in the middle of all the noise and, the manufactured confusion of modern life. It's the only way to get to what he calls mental sovereignty.
And the thesis of the sovereign mind is the convergence point for all of this. It argues that modern success, especially high-stakes success, means you have to bridge two worlds.
Two worlds that, on the surface, look completely incompatible.
On one side, you have internal mastery. This is drawing from deep philosophies like Taoism, Zen.
And on the other, you have external strategy. This is the sharp, sometimes brutal world of high-level business, finance, sales.
So the central conflict, the question for you, the independent agent, is how do you maintain absolute mental clarity? How do you keep your foresight when the world is, as the blueprint says, on fire?
You need the inner stillness of the monk, but you also need the outer ruthlessness of the market titan. It's a paradox.
And the juxtaposition that just immediately hooks you is incredible. On the Sovereign Thinker's bookshelf, you find two books side by side that feel like they're from different planets.
You have Andy Grove's Only the Paranoid Survive.
The Ultimate Corporate Survival Guide.
And right next to it, Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching.
Profound, ancient, fluid wisdom. What's fascinating is that this philosophy informatica approach doesn't see them as opposites.
Not at all. They're two sides of the same coin, two necessary parts of a single strategy for survival, and frankly, for competitive advantage in a volatile world.
Grove gives you the analytical rigor, the demand for data.
And Lao Tzu gives you the philosophical fluidity, the understanding of flow.
So when we talk about defining the sovereign mind, it's way beyond just thinking for yourself. The sources describe it as owning your attention, owning and directing it.
And operating with a highly interconnected worldview, refusing to outsource your own thinking.
You have to be the architect of your own primary operating system.
Exactly. And that architect doesn't panic at the chaos, the headlines, the market swings. They see the chaos itself as a pattern, a predictable, often ancient pattern.
And that's the leader's edge, that ability to see the system behind the events.
Which brings us to a really powerful idea. Your philosophy, the fundamental beliefs you hold about how reality works, that is your primary operating system.
So if you, the listener, aren't actively programming it, if you're not feeding it high signal inputs,
Like the I Ching and strategic selling?
then something else is programming it for you. The algorithm, the media cycle, cultural inertia.
And that default programming is almost always optimized for reaction, not for foresight.
So this transition from being reacted upon to acting with intention, it's a massive philosophical shift. It takes us right into the deep waters of strategy.
Which is section 1, the philosophy of survival. This is where we see the collision of strategic inflection points and the ancient idea of wu-wei.
And it all starts with the modern side of that equation, with Andy Grove, the legendary CEO of Intel.
Grove's book, Only the Paranoid Survive, it introduced this concept of the strategic inflection point, the SIP, This is the diagnostic tool for the external world.
Okay, let's ground this for a second. What is SAP exactly, and why use a word like paranoia? It sounds, well, negative.
SAP is that moment when the fundamental forces of an industry or a career or even society are about to change, irreversibly.
So it's not a small shift.
No. Grove called it a 10x shift, a force of change so profound that everything you did before is suddenly 10 times less effective.
The sources have a great analogy for this. It's like you're a deep-sea diver, and you have your maps, you know the physics of water,
Right.
and then all of a sudden, the density of the water changes. The pressure triples. Your old maps aren't just outdated.
They're dangerous. They're actively lethal because they give you a false sense of security.
And that is why Grove says you need paranoia.
Exactly. The biggest danger of a site pass is that people and companies are blinded by their past success. They don't want to believe that the very thing that made them successful will now cause them to fail.
So Grove's paranoia isn't clinical anxiety. It's an operational state. It's hyper-awareness.
It's the refusal to be complacent. It's the refusal to believe that stability is permanent.
It demands what he called technical rigor. You know, constant data analysis, understanding market mechanics,
Yeah.
the core MBA stuff.
But you apply it with this constant suspicion that the rug is about to be pulled out from under you.
And the sources use a textbook example of what happens when you resist this, the fall of Kodak.
This isn't just a business school case study. It's a philosophical lesson in rigidity.
We should probably slow down on Kodak here because it's so powerful. They didn't miss the technology.
No, they invented it. They built the first digital camera.
So where did they fail? What was the philosophical breakdown?
It was an emotional attachment, a conceptual one. Kodak's entire identity, its culture, its profit structure, it was all tied to the chemistry of film.
So the idea of a digital future, for them, meant killing their own golden goose.
Exactly. They couldn't bring themselves to actively cannibalize their highly profitable film business, so they resisted the change. They thought they could manage the SIP, slow it down.
They were trying to make the river flow backward because they built a beautiful dam.
Perfect analogy. They had the hardware, the technical knowledge was there, but the philosophical software was brittle. They couldn't let go of their identity as a film company.
And that is the perfect hinge point. It's where Grove's corporate paranoia meets the fluid wisdom of Lao Tzu.
If Grove gives you the terrifying diagnosis, the SIP is coming, be paranoid, then Lao Tzu provides the antidote to the rigidity that paranoia can cause.
Right, because the core Taoist idea is that change is the only constant. The market, politics, information flow, it's all flux. That's the unchanging truth of the Tao Te Ching.
And this lets us correct a huge misunderstanding about a key Taoist concept, Wu Wei,
Most people think it means doing nothing, passivity.
which is a really damaging interpretation if you're trying to apply it to high-stakes strategy.
If an SAP is coming, doing nothing is suicide. So what does Wu Wei actually mean in the context of the sovereign mind?
The sources clarify it beautifully. It means effortless action or action in alignment with the flow.
Like a surfer?
Exactly like a surfer. They aren't passive, they're intensely active, but their movements are so synchronized with the wave that it looks effortless.
So when an SIP hits, the rigid response is to fight it, to cling harder to the old business plan. That's just friction, exhausting friction.
It's pure beta state thinking. The Wu Wei response is to recognize the shift in the market's Tao, pivot instantly, and ride that new wave.
That SIP is creating a huge amount of energy and information.
And the rigid giant gets crushed by that energy. The fluid agent uses it for propulsion.
So the danger of rigidity is existential. The second you try to freeze a strategy, you're fighting the Tao of the market. The effort alone will defeat you.
And this need for flexibility is hammered home by another key text on that bookshelf, the I Ching, the Book of Changes.
I always thought of the I Ching as more of a spiritual or mystical text.
And it can be, but the source material reframes it as a tool for pattern recognition, a profound one.
So it's an intellectual tool to trigger your intuition, to see the meta patterns that pure logic might miss.
Exactly. Its presence reinforces that long-term success requires constant adaptation. The sources quote its core idea. Success comes to those who are flexible and upright.
Flexible and upright. I like that. You hold to your principles, your integrity, but you're infinitely pliable in your methods.
That is the perfect synthesis.
And this synthesis, technical rigor meets philosophical fluidity. It's all captured in the most powerful metaphor in the whole blueprint, the Inner Earth Station.
Right. This comes from an old hobbyist manual called Build a Personal Earth Station for Worldwide Satellite TV Reception. It's such a brilliant metaphor for consciousness.
Because the challenge of our era isn't a lack of information. It's too much static. We're drowning in low-frequency noise.
So if your mind, your internal Earth Station, is fixed, if it's locked onto the frequency of your political tribe or yesterday's success or just constant outrage,
You will completely miss the signal that reality has changed.
and that signal is the SIP. The sovereign synthesis is being able to practice Grove's technical rigor analyzing the data, the supply chains, the numbers.
While at the same time practicing the Taoist philosophical fluidity. Being willing in an instant to let go of your business model, your identity, your most cherished beliefs.
So you don't just survive the SIP, you harness the chaos. Chaos is highly informative. It shows you all the weaknesses in a system.
The sovereign mind uses that high information moment to propel itself forward, to make change frictionless.
And this is a huge but, to get to that level of low latency thinking, that instant pivot without brain fog or emotional drag, you need a pristine biological foundation.
The mind is software, but it's useless if the server it's running on is crashing.
Which is the perfect transition into Section 2, tuning the hardware, the biodigital interface.
If Section 1 was the philosophy, the map,
Yeah.
this is the optimized vehicle.
Right. If you're demanding that level of hyper-awareness to spot an SIP before anyone else, your physical state, the hardware, it has to be perfect. The mind is software, the body is the server.
This is an area where the blueprint is.
Yeah.
Well, it's pretty demanding. The implication is if your server is inflamed or sluggish, the system will crash right when the pressure is highest.
It's a non-negotiable part of internal sovereignty. You can't have intellectual fluidity with poor biology. It's impossible. Most modern diets, the sources say, are just noisy.
They generate inflammation. They generate brain fog.
And that brain fog, in this context, isn't just a minor inconvenience. It's the biological static on your internal satellite dish. It literally prevents you from receiving the SIP signal.
It's exhausting. The energy that should go to pattern recognition is being diverted to just putting out fires inside your own body.
Which brings us to the books on the shelf like The Carnivore Diet and Brain Building. To a lot of listeners, diet might seem totally disconnected from corporate strategy.
So why is metabolic function so central to this whole operating system?
The logic here isn't about any one specific diet. It's about using an aggressive protocol as a factory reset for your metabolism. The goal is to maximize the signal-to-noise ratio of your biological system.
To enable pure, sustained thought.
Let's use an analogy. Think of the body as an engine. Most people today are running on a glucose-burning engine.
So sugar and carbs.
Right. And glucose is like cheap gas. It burns hot and fast. You get quick energy spikes.
But you need to refuel constantly, and you
Okay.
get the spikes and the crashes.
That 3 p.m. crash, that need for caffeine, the inability to focus, that's the static. That is actively obscuring the signal. You're forced to operate in a low-capacity state.
Okay, so what's the alternative engine?
The alternative is shifting to a ketone-burning engine, which is the goal of these low-inflammation protocols. Ketones are like, they're like nuclear fission for the body, a slow, steady, incredibly high-output energy source.
So when the brain has that steady, high-octane fuel,
The whole biological system stabilizes. That paranoid survival instinct stops being an anxious tremor and becomes a calm, sustained, high-resolution alertness.
you're not fighting your own biology anymore. You're just tuned in to the now with total clarity.
The ability to focus for 10 hours isn't about willpower. It's about biological optimization. You eliminate the dietary noise and suddenly you're receptive to the subtle signals of reality.
So once the hardware is stable and humming, the sources move on to tuning the software. And this is where it gets really interesting with vibration and frequency.
Right. We start seeing texts like the cosmic octave and music, the brain, and ecstasy.
This is moving beyond biochemistry and into the physics of consciousness.
The premise is simple. Everything is vibration. Everything has a frequency. Planets, atoms, colors, and the neural networks in your brain.
And modern life is a cacophony. The constant noise, the notifications, the doom scrolling. The sources argue this desynchronizes our brainwaves. It causes a measurable loss of intuition.
It keeps us locked in a fight or flight state. The brain is like a very sensitive musical instrument. If you constantly bombard it with dissonance, it can't function properly.
So tuning the receiver means using specific frequencies to intentionally shift your brain state.
These tools could be binaural beats, certain rhythms, or even the focus practice of playing an instrument, like the guitar, which is why Fretboard Hacks is on the list. It's a neural synchronization exercise.
The goal is a deliberate state shift. You want to move your brain out of that frantic reactive beta state
The state of anxiety and constant external reaction.
and into the receptive alpha or theta states.
Yeah.
So how do you know the difference? What does alpha actually feel like?
Beta is that feeling of urgency when you're just checking emails or scrolling social media. Alpha is the flow state. It's focused calm. It's where deep work happens, where insights just arrive. Theta is even deeper, almost meditative.
And these states are essential for spotting the subtle shifts that pure logic could miss. This is where you access that inner light, your intuition.
It's the state that's cited in research on things like remote viewing or the ability to synthesize huge amounts of data in an instant. It's not a mystical gift. It's a measurable output of an optimized, synchronized brainwave state.
So the integrated machine, the biodigital interface, is this low latency connection.
Yeah.
You stabilize the hardware with clean fuel, you tune the software with frequency.
And if the system is running optimally, things like memory and rapid learning, they just happen. They're not goals you strive for. They're the natural outputs of the system.
Which is why books like Smart for Life and Remember, Everything You Read are on the shelf.
And this efficiency, this lack of friction, leads to this idea of the secret of invisibility.
Which isn't about literally vanishing.
No, it's about moving through the world without creating a wake. Think about it. A person operating with high friction is loud, reactive, predictable. They're easily manipulated by the media cycles.
The invisible sovereign moves with such alignment, such wu-wei, that their actions are unpredictable. They're a step ahead because they are biologically and philosophically tuned to the high frequency now.
But having this internal mastery is only half the battle. You have to apply that power to the world of people, of transactions, of competition.
And that requires a very specific protocol, which brings us to Section 3, the shamanic protocol integrating power and practice.
This is the part that really forces you to throw out your old categories. You see these high-stakes corporate books, strategic selling, conceptual selling.
Sitting right next to deep spiritual texts like the Medicine Bag and Sacred Geometry.
The obvious question is, how can a high-pressure sales negotiation possibly be the same thing as a shamanic ritual? Isn't that just a way to rationalize corporate manipulation?
It's a critical question. And the philosophy argues that the common view of sales, just moving goods for money, is totally outdated.
To the sovereign agent, every negotiation is an energetic and conceptual transaction. Success means your inner light, that tuned high-frequency self, has to align perfectly with the client's deepest needs.
Okay, so let's look at conceptual selling through that lens. The idea is you're not selling a product, you're selling a concept, a new reality for the buyer.
And that is precisely the function of a shaman. A shaman's power comes from their ability to shift the conceptual understanding of reality.
They shift the tribe's understanding of illness or their relationship to the land.
They are selling a new, more enabling conceptual reality.
And the modern titan closing a billion-dollar deal is acting as a shaman for the boardroom. They're shifting the buyer's worldview into a new, profitable paradigm.
And the framework for this is found in something that seems totally unrelated: sacred geometry.
Okay, I need a tangible example here. How does a geometric pattern like the Fibonacci sequence apply to a business deal? It sounds nice, but is it useful?
It's strategically crucial. It defines the structure for what the sources call profitable resonance. Every successful strategic sale follows a geometric pattern of alignment.
So you have the seller's concept, the new reality you're offering.
And you have the buyer's concept, their existing need or problem.
And where they meet, you have common ground.
But it's more than that. The geometry says the real profit isn't in the common ground, but in the crucial overlap. The space where your concept intersects their need and generates a third, new, shared reality.
The sources call this the vesica piscis of profit.
The vesica piscis, that almond shape made by two overlapping circles. That is the sacred space where a new reality is born.
It's the zone of perfect harmony.
Exactly. The goal is profitable resonance, not just brute force revenue. It has to create sustainable value for both sides. And that requires Zen detachment to listen and paranoid rigor to make sure the alignment is real and stable.
Of course, the context for all this has changed. With the office-home boundary gone, the personal workspace is now the command center. It's the physical location of the inner Earth station.
And if that space is chaotic or low vibration, the sovereign mind can't stay in that alpha state. Your workspace has to be consciously architected. It's a temple of productivity.
This is where Feng Shui comes in. not as mysticism, but as applied energy architecture for workflow.
You purge anything that creates low-frequency distraction, clutter, bad lighting, digital noise. Your environment is an extension of your operating system.
And that physical environment is supported by an automatic system. This is why we see books like The Automatic Millionaire. Why is automation so important?
Because willpower is a finite biological resource. If you spend your daily willpower deciding what to eat or worrying about bills or managing your inbox,
You won't have the mental reserves left to spot the next 10x inflection point.
you automate the low-level maintenance finances, diet, workflow to free the conscious mind.
So it can stay in that high-frequency alpha state, constantly scanning the horizon for the next SIP. That's its real job.
Which brings us to the ultimate practical application, the 10-point synthesis protocol. This is the daily routine that brings the ancient sage and the modern titan together. This is how you, the listener, move from theory to practice.
Let's run through it. Point 1, the metabolic factory reset. How does the day start?
You stabilize the server first. High protein, zero toxin fuel, clean signals, stable energy, no sugar crashes. This is the bedrock of low latency thinking.
Point 2, inflection mapping, applying Grove's paranoia.
First thing in the morning, before the noise starts, you ask yourself, what fundamental shift has happened that I'm pretending hasn't? You have to identify the change before it forces itself on you.
Point 3, sonic tuning.
15 minutes with a frequency tool, binaural beats, playing guitar, even deep silence. You are consciously resynchronizing your brainwaves to get into that high signal alpha state for deep work.
Point 4, the Wu-Wei workflow, finding the river in your work.
You look at your biggest project and find the point of highest friction. Where are you fighting the current? Then you stop. You look for the conceptual overlap, the path of least resistance. Effortless action comes from removing friction, not from trying harder.
Point 5, pattern recognition, using that geometric lens.
You look at your calendar, your commitments, through the lens of sacred geometry. Is there balance or dissonance? If the pattern is ugly, the output will be ugly. And if that analysis reveals a block, you move to point 6, the oracle check.
Which isn't fortune telling, it's about activating your intuition.
Precisely. You consult the I Ching or a similar tool to shatter your confirmation bias. It forces you to see alternative patterns that rigid beta state logic would miss.
Point 7, the leader's space, architecting your environment.
You actively purge your workspace of low-frequency distractions. Your desk is an altar of productivity. You curate your external world to match the clarity you want in your internal world. Point 8, knowledge accumulation, upgrading the software.
20 minutes with a heavy text. Something intellectual demanding. You engage with it deeply, using techniques to actually remember what you read. You are constantly upgrading your OS.
Point 9, the shamanic transaction.
Pre-alignment. Before a big meeting or negotiation, you visualize the geometric alignment of the deal. You aim for resonance, that vesica piscis of shared value, not just winning an argument.
And finally, point 10, the invisible exit.
Shutting down the Earth station for the day.
You have to actively detach, turn it off. Don't let the day's static bleed into your rest and regeneration. You return to the stillness of the unchanging truth.
This whole system, this philosophy informatica, is designed for you, the independent agent, the curious intellect, who gets that the real edge isn't in mainstream data anymore.
It's in synthesizing the broadest, highest resolution worldview you possibly can. The world is moving faster than ever. This toolkit is designed to keep you ahead of the curve.
To remain sovereign, you have to be fluid. You have to stay paranoid. And you have to be the disciplined master of your own attention.
So what does this all mean looking forward? Well, if success requires understanding these deep time cycles, these patterns of the past that dictate market shifts and social change,
Then the conventional view of history, the one we all learned in school, that has to be questioned too.
and looking ahead, the source material shows the next stage of this journey goes into what it calls forbidden foundations. Your interest in sources like Graham Hancock's Fingerprints of the Gods or Zecharia Sitchin's The 12th Planet.
It's not just a historical hobby.
No. According to this blueprint, it is the ultimate competitive advantage for understanding modern global cycles and for anticipating the next huge inflection point that everyone else will dismiss as impossible.
So if the present is moving faster than ever, maybe the key to navigating it isn't in looking forward, but in looking back at the forgotten, deeper patterns of the past.
Our next deep dive will explore exactly that. Why the study of ancient cataclysms and lost civilizations might just be essential for modern strategic planning.